I like that. I'd like to, pull a scenario for you. So if you had a client come to you and they, I think a lot of teams are kind of recognizing this. The more and more I talk to more hybrid or remote teams, because of the pandemic, a lot of teams went, remote or hybrid, and then they kind of maintain this hybrid model, right? I've had some companies lately, they basically are, hey, we're going fully remote. There's just no reason to have the expense of the office space and the infrastructure when we can fully do our jobs remotely. And if they hire you on as the COO, what do you feel like is your checklist of the first 90 days that you're going to try to accomplish?
Well, for one, I wouldn't have chosen logistics as a fully remote organization because some organizations that I would consider logistic companies actually have people who are working on the ground on schedule shifts. They are moving physical products around, so that's not a remote first type organization. But and that's a reality, right? Not all businesses can be remote, completely remote. But we'll just take say some other knowledge expertise type consulting business, right? Most of the times, a lot of those kinds of organizations can be done fully remote. They don't need to be in person. But ideally, if I had 90 days, ideally I would have an opportunity to see how they've been operating before they go remote. Because what I need to understand is how is this team used to communicating? How do they collaborate? What are the containers and the interactions that they're having, right? What are the subtle social interactions happening? But also, what are the official interactions happening? And what do they talk about in those spaces? What are the communications that are happening there? Um, if I understand more about that, then that helps me start to understand, okay, if we're going to go completely remote, what do we need to replace is not quite the right word, but account for, I think is rather how I would describe it. So if they're like ideally, again, if you have a strong culture where people have good relationships with each other and there's friendly bonds and things like that, um, the one of the things that they'll probably be missing is just having the opportunity to just connect and socialize with each other. In one organization, we had set a weekly 15-minute all hands meeting, just organization wide. And that was an opportunity for any sort of company announcements, which there were not always company announcements. But it was also a time for the team members to just connect and socialize. So they would talk about whatever, right? Their hobbies or what they were doing or what they were looking forward to, some event coming up, whatever the case might be. And that helped preserve some of that, well, just like I said, some of that social bonding opportunity and the opportunity to get to know each other, especially like with new team members where they may be focused on specific relationships of who they're working with. That allowed them the exposure of who else was in the organization and for them to build some more of a relationship with other people just through the interactions and getting to know them. So that would probably be one thing I would make sure is in place is some sort of, I don't want to say town hall because it makes it sound like people are just being talked to, right? But more like a forum, if you will, or town square opportunity, I guess is probably better, right? Like what's your water cooler space, right? Um, you can also have you can have a virtual channel, like, if you're using Slack or some other messaging platform, right? Just having a water cooler space where people can send funny pictures or drop silly things or whatever. That's also really important, right? Just that space to relate in a more human kind of way, in addition to the intentional conversations that need to happen in order to drive the business forward. Um, I would probably also make even though you can take all those meetings and then just make them all across the calendar, I think it's really important to be very intentional in meetings. I mean, this is regardless of whether you're remote or not. But what I mean by that is be careful about how many meetings you're scheduling and be intentional about when things actually need to be a meeting versus when they don't actually need to be a meeting. Some cultures can be very meeting heavy if you're dealing with people in the team who prefer to talk rather than write emails. And that's great from the perspective of, it's aligning more with their work style, but it's a conflict if you have some team members who are also not very conversation oriented. They are just fine writing emails. And for them, they would rather you send them an email that they can think about and then respond to you later with. There's a lot of different work styles and personalities, right?